Good morning, everyone. My name is Martin Vladimirov, and I'm the director of the Center for Democracy. I'm really happy to welcome you all to this great event on the storage capacity for Southeast Europe and the perspective for unlocking the growth in this nascent sector over the next decade. We are living in a new world in 2022, a world defined by geopolitical crises and an energy debacle, I would say, which has undermined the foundations of the energy market liberalization in Europe. Energy security risks are undermining political stability, are increasing energy poverty risks, and raising fears that the European Green Deal might not deliver its promises. This is all wrong. The European Green Deal is probably the biggest and most ambitious objective that the EU has ever put in front of itself. And it will be probably the easiest solution to the energy crisis today. All the populist rhetoric based on energy nationalism should be discarded with argument, should be justified. That the current energy transition policy and energy transition direction that the European Union has taken needs to be justified by the broader objectives of energy and climate security and the countering of the growing influence of authoritarian states in Europe. The best energy and climate security, in our opinion, and CSD has worked a lot on energy and climate security this year, is energy independence. How do you achieve energy independence? The best and probably cheapest way to do that is to take advantage of the enormous potential for renewable energy technologies locally. To harness this potential, however, and to prevent, self-defeating forces such as cannibalization of the sector, you need these intermittent resources to be well balanced. And that's why you need storage technologies. Storage technologies, which seemed like a sci-fi idea just 20, 30 years ago in terms of commercial viability, are already on the market. They're already viable. They're already changing the way electricity markets are operating across Europe and across the world. Southeast Europe, as usual, is a lagging region in that respect. But the COVID crisis and the impact of the COVID crisis has allowed governments to refocus their attention to new cutting-edge technologies, including storage. And many of the governments in Southeast Europe have zoomed in, doubled down on investments in these technologies, including large-scale storage units. Today, in this discussion, we're going to talk about the different perspectives for the uptake of storage technologies in Southeast Europe, more specifically in Bulgaria, Romania, and Greece. And we're going to present a joint assessment led by E3 Analytics on what is the progress of storage technologies in the region, what are the key bottlenecks for unleashing the growth, what kind of regulatory frameworks are needed to help the industry develop further, what kind of governance deficits we need to prevent in order to allow this transition process and this uptake of storage to be democratic, to contribute to the decentralization of power supply, and to prevent the monopolization of the control of the energy transition in the hands of a few large-scale actors. I'm really happy to welcome to the panel today Toby Couture, who is going to give a keynote presentation with the key findings of a recent analysis that we prepared together with him and other partners in the region. And then I'll give the floor to my colleague Constanza Rangova, who is going to moderate an excellent panel with some of the best energy experts in Southeast Europe to focus on the different national, but also regional perspectives for the development of the storage industry. Toby, the floor is yours. I would love to hear more about these findings. I think this is the first ever regional in-depth focus on storage. So kick it off, Toby. Thanks.
Thank you, Martin. And Welcome aboard, everyone. Great to be with you here today to lead this off with a quick presentation of a recent report just published, finally packaged, and put online yesterday. So this is hot off the press. And I've put the link in the chat for those of you who are interested in the full version. What I've done this morning is created a short version just for this webinar that we can work through for the presentation. I'm going to try to make this full screen. So that we can, there we go. So I'm Toby Couture. I run E3 Analytics, a small renewable energy consulting firm based in the Berlin area. We've done quite a lot of work in Southeast Europe and have published a series of reports, which you can also find on the website, on the role of solar, the role of renewables, on power system transformation. And this latest report really takes a closer look at developments in storage and the potential of storage. And as Martin has rightly pointed out at the beginning, we are living through some quite extraordinary times in energy markets and in the energy world. And for the first time, really since the 1970s, again, energy security is back to the very top of the global political agenda. And that has galvanized governments, not only in Europe, but also around the world, to accelerate the deployment of renewable energies, accelerate the deployment of wind and solar, but also of technologies like storage to improve the stability, resilience, and fundamentally the security of energy systems. And from the beginning of the renewable energy transition, which we can trace back to the sort of 1960s and 70s in countries like Germany and Denmark, a core part of the energy transition and a core promise at the heart of the vision was always around energy security. Energy that can be supplied locally, that can be in local hands, and that can't be interrupted or cut off by others. And that's one of the big reasons why technologies like solar and wind, which are abundant, which can be generated domestically, hold so much promise. But in order to integrate large shares beyond 20%, 30%, 40% of variable renewables in the grid, we start to need additional system investments in technologies that can help balance the system. And storage is at the heart of that conversation. There are multiple different ways to improve power system flexibility and improve the integration of variable renewables. Not all are technological, but some are. And a key part of that, as I'll try to sketch out in these few slides, involve the use of storage technologies. So this year, there are several factors that make a scale-up of storage more likely now than ever before. First, high electricity and gas prices have increased the attractiveness of investing in alternatives. At the same time, that fossil and electricity prices have been going up, storage costs continue to come down and are now, for the first time, at a point where they're economically competitive and economically attractive for companies and investors to invest in. The second big point is these concerns around energy security. And I've already touched on those, but this is the energy security narrative, and the importance of mitigating price volatility have never been more important, both for political reasons to protect and keep energy prices low and stable, but also fundamentally for these geopolitical and security reasons. The third is the rise of wind and solar. We are seeing some countries in the Southeast Europe region, including regions like Kosovo and Albania, even Montenegro, starting to deploy wind and solar at scale. And that is leading to pressures in the power system that has traditionally been dominated heavily either by one or a few technologies, and where technologies in particular like lignite still play a big role. So the rise of wind and solar create a need for more power system flexibility and in turn for storage technologies. So in partnership with CSD, we've created this map to give you a sense of the overview of the storage landscape in the region. These are just a selection. This is just a selection of projects. You can see here which ones are in planning and which ones are actually already operational. But as you can see, there are projects essentially located throughout the region. Some of them are standalone, so essentially a pure play battery system connected to the grid. Others are combined in hybrid configurations with wind and solar projects. So far, a significant share of them are lithium ion, but we are starting to see other chemistries starting to be deployed as well. And if you want more details on this, you can also look more closely in the report itself. So when you take a step back, it's clear that battery storage technologies and in general have been experiencing pretty rapid cost declines. And this is what we refer to as experience curves. As the market grows, as the production capacity grows, costs decline. We've seen the same thing with semiconductors. We've seen the same thing with the rise of solar power. Now this very same trend is occurring across battery chemistries. Although we talk a lot about lithium ion, it's quite remarkable to see that these cost declines are occurring across chemistries. So there's a lot happening. Another point that's often criticized and that we can touch on in the discussion, and I encourage a debate on, is the recycling question. And research is ongoing, including from the EU side, to increase not only how much of a battery can be recycled, but also to improve the manufacturing of batteries to make them easier to recycle. And currently, it's estimated that somewhere around 95% of the actual raw materials and metals in batteries can be recycled. So in the longer term, and this is one of our recommendations at the end, the vision here should be to move to a more circular economy paradigm with the use of batteries, where batteries can be adopted and deployed in their primary application, and then potentially have a secondary life in a secondary application, and then eventually recycled and put back into the production by recycling the core minerals and metals at the heart of them. So I think that's a really important part of the story and something that I see exciting developments on, and I think we all need more research and more analysis on to improve progress here. So let's try to understand storage a little bit more. I think this will be helpful as we dive into the discussions a bit later. This chart tries to capture two fundamental realities. On the left-hand side, we have the costs. So the actual breakdown of battery storage project costs. On the right, you see a breakdown of what a battery storage system could, depending on the market rules and depending on the electricity market liberalization and ancillary services market, what a battery project could generate in terms of the breakdown of its revenues. So for many battery applications developed over the last few years, there's really one or two primary use cases that the battery is invested in for. Either energy arbitrage or balancing, or meeting peak capacity needs. In some cases, for commercial and industrial customers, it's actually about reliability. They want to make sure that if there's a power outage in the grid, the operations can continue. So those different use cases have a different value. But as we connect those to electricity markets, over the course of one battery project's lifetime, these different revenue components will change. In some years, depending on the pricing and the landscape, certain components may be more important. And over time, that value, what we call the value stack, can change. So it's important to think of battery projects not as a single use asset. They're not just like a solar project or a wind farm or a hydro project that produce one thing, namely electricity. They can provide a range of services to the power system. And depending on how those services are valued, that will change the value stack. So when we look at these various services, we can visualize them across a spectrum. The ones that are focused more on the distributed services, and the ones that are focused more on bulk power needs, wholesale market, sort of in front of the meter type services. And you can see how these stack up. There are some that are really designed predominantly for very small applications and some that are predominantly for large. So when we're talking about pumped hydro, nobody's really talking about small backyard, blocking a brook and running a turbine on a small stream. We're talking about larger scale projects. Now, if we break that down further, we can see how these different services stack up. And for more on this, again, I encourage you to look at the full report. This is really just to give you a snapshot. It's possible to break down the services into these 5 categories: energy and capacity, transmission-related services, distribution-related services, the customer level services. So if a CNI or commercial industrial or even a household is investing in storage, and then finally, ancillary services. This list is not exhaustive, but it captures the main applications or use cases that storage can support with, the kinds of services that storage can provide. And as you can see here, the range is quite wide. This makes storage very much more like a Swiss Army knife than a butcher's cleaver. It's much more capable of doing multiple different things. It's not just a knife, it has multiple applications, multiple different services. And as my colleagues, Vasilis and others will speak to in a moment, there are certain applications like in islands where very unique use cases make storage even more valuable, and where some of these particular services become more important than they would in a centralized grid. So in wrapping up, a few final comments before we get to the 10-point plan with a few policy recommendations. Power system operators and utilities may say, well, storage is great, but why invest in it? There's all kinds of other ways to increase power system flexibility. Storage has a few key advantages. It can be deployed rapidly. So instead of particularly battery storage projects, we aren't talking about lead times of 6 to 7 years or 8 years or more. We're talking about a matter of months. And that's particularly in today's markets and in today's geopolitical situation, speed matters, and deploying fast can be really a huge asset. Second, storage is more geopolitically secure. Conventional plants can be interrupted, fuel supply can be disrupted, and frankly, lines, as we've seen, can be sabotaged. Storage provides the ability to buffer the power system, to buffer the energy system against instability. Third, storage can provide very valuable flexibility, particularly to ramp up and down, to adapt to power supply from wind and solar. And finally, it's increasingly cost effective. So it used to be the case 7 or 8 years ago, or even 10 years ago, storage was considered one of the most expensive options for power system flexibility. Now, storage ranks among the cheapest. And that change is partly why we're here today. That shift in the economic landscape makes storage fundamentally attractive in a way that it wasn't a decade ago, or even, some would argue, 5 years ago. So now, a few final points. Where do we go from here? There's a lot more we could say here, but I'll keep this short. The first, update market rules to allow storage projects to capture more value and to contribute more value, frankly. Because if a service is not paid for, then the storage asset may not be configured to provide it, or may not simply provide it. So having market rules, having electricity products that allow storage to be paid for what it does can really help improve the business case further and unlock more storage investment. Second, establish financial incentives to support deployment. Binding targets, as we've seen in the case of Greece. Greece is working on a set of targets. There are also other governments in like Spain and Italy that have adopted specific targets for the role of storage. The fourth is explore the use of auctions to procure storage, specifically for in front of the meter storage. There's a lot of potential to use the lessons that we've learned from auction design and actually start procuring them, either standalone or in hybrid projects. So there's been auctions, for example, in India recently, where they have these so-called around-the-clock auctions, where they auction a block for hybrid configured projects, including wind, solar, and storage, to provide around-the-clock power supply. And that's essentially what's tendered. So we're no longer auctioning pure standalone solar projects. It's really a bundled project that includes storage. And the fifth here is, if incentives are going to be deployed, they should be prioritized on behind-the-meter applications. Currently, the economics of in front of the meter storage are actually pretty strong because energy prices are quite high. So if financial incentives are going to be deployed, they should probably be preferentially targeted at households and businesses rather than at large-scale mega projects. Number six, there's a number of technical and licensing requirements that still hamper storage, and many countries across Southeast Europe have not yet come to grips with what this means and how to license and permit storage assets. That's an area where we really need to see more progress fast if we're going to see this market grow. 7, storage can be fast, not only in terms of its deployment, but also in terms of its reaction time. So we aren't talking about 10 to 20 minute reaction times. We're talking about seconds or even milliseconds reaction time for providing certain services. So the shorter and more dynamic and more coupled electricity markets become, storage becomes more valuable. The 8th point is, as we move in this direction, the grid needs to get smarter. So it makes sense to couple the rise of storage with smarter grid architecture, including advanced meters, so that storage can be, if it's sited at customers' location, can actually play a more dynamic and integrated role. That applies not only to batteries, but also to things like hot water storage or other forms of thermal storage, for example, that can be coupled and dispatched in a smart way in relation to the availability of, say, solar and wind power. The 9th, we shouldn't put all of our eggs in one basket. Countries like Germany, where I'm currently based, have certainly learned that with the dependence on gas in recent years. We shouldn't repeat the same mistake with battery chemistries. It's smart to have multiple chemistries at work and to encourage the cost decline across a range of different battery chemistries. So having diversity in the portfolio is also smart. And finally, as I pointed out a few moments ago, we should be looking at this in terms of a circular economy pillar. Storage should not just be input, output into the trash can. The idea should be to create an ecosystem, including the recycling facilities, that we can actually generate the circular economy benefits and ensure that the battery is actually, or significant parts of the battery and the metals are recycled And those are the kinds of projects that can also benefit and should benefit from public support. So if we're talking about where should public money go and how can we support investment in a battery ecosystem, investing in the recycling end is smart, because there's going to be a lot of demand for not only grid scale batteries, but also for electric vehicle batteries, and frankly, from appliances and laptops and everything else that has batteries today. So more investment in the recycling end, moving towards a more circular economy is at the heart of this. And I think it's really important for all governments and all member states, including in Southeast Europe and the Balkan region, to take this circular economy approach. So there's a lot more in the report. This has been long, and I've actually spoken for longer than I had hoped to. So apologies to my colleagues. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Toby, for this really excellent presentation. And I encourage everyone to have a look at the detailed report, as it has a very rich array of information that you definitely find useful. Now, I would like to switch the gears and go into discussion mode and open the panel discussion. So we have some really excellent panelists among here today. And I would like to have a little bit of a framing question session before I give the word to the first speaker. So I would really ask our panelists to focus on what is the role of storage systems for a successful green transition, and to really focus again on the role of public money in support of such projects and what measures need to be done. Also to talk about the regulatory and administrative issues, especially the ones that you see as the most relevant in the case of Southeast Europe and your respective country. And also to talk about what are the opportunities, especially in Southeast Europe, especially in the case of huge energy security problems, both in terms of gas reliance and in terms of energy poverty and the difficulties of the green transition and of coal phase out. So with that, I would like to give the word to our first speaker, who is Mariana Janeva. She is the Policy Director of the Association for Production, Storage and Trading of Electricity. She is a fellow economist with a background also in working in engineering and design consultancies, with a number of very interesting publications in the field of renewables and storage technology. So I'm really looking forward to what she has to say. And I would like to also have a very specific request that she also touches upon the National Recovery and Resilience Plan in Bulgaria, as we have a huge component focused on energy storage projects. So if you can touch upon that as well, that would be great. So the floor is yours, and thank you so much for coming again.
Thank you, Constanza. You introduced me in the best possible way. So really, thank you for that. Thanks to CSD for the invitation to be present today, and also to Toby for this beautiful summary of the value that storage can contribute to the energy system. I really think that this is the most concise description of the role of storage for the energy transition as a whole. Specifically on the role of storage that I see, and talking a little bit on the Bulgarian side here, for everyone who would be interested, I will post a link in the chat as well. The association that I represent today presented a very detailed report on what storage means, both in terms of technology and market perspectives for Bulgaria. And today, I will give you just a fast update of where we are in Bulgaria with the plans that we had on the National Recovery and Resilience Fund, and what I see as a priority for policy development to really upscale the storage component in our energy system. So the National Recovery and Resilience Plan is the only strategic document that touches upon storage in Bulgaria, and it has components that go both front of the meter for large-scale projects and behind the meter, mainly for self-consumption systems. So the more interesting part to investors, of course, are the large-scale projects. And one of these projects is a 1.4 gigawatt hybrid auctions that will be held, I hope so, soon. For hybrid projects, renewables plus storage, we expect mostly to go into the solar plus storage side, but it is not technology specific, so every technology will be welcome to participate in the tenders. As far as I know, the government is currently working with EBRD to structure the tender terms and conditions. We are behind schedule with what was announced in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, because the tenders should have started already in the last quarter of 2022. I do not see them happening before the second half of next year, given the current process that is being developed. And the other large-scale projects in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan is a 6 GWh standalone storage systems, which are supposed to develop the model of storage operators and independent market players that will help with the integration of renewables into the system and operate independently of the TCO and DCOs in the country. There are a lot of question marks around these projects, and I haven't seen any development on working on the government side. So unfortunately, I cannot give any more details than what is already written in the project file within the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. We do expect that somehow the ambitions there may be scaled down, just because given the fact that large-scale storage at the moment experiences lead time of about 1 year from order placement to receiving actually the storage system on site. I expect that some part of the plan will be transferred to the hybrid systems, because it will be easier to give the responsibility to private companies to procure the storage system and combine it on site with either wind or solar facility. For the bigger projects, that's currently the status. The behind-the-meter projects are advancing much faster. There is a program that is aimed at households, including up to 100% financings for energy-poor households to procure for either photovoltaic system, photovoltaic plus storage, or thermal solar collectors for hot water. The program is developed, and I think that it should be announced pretty soon. And just on Monday, the Ministry of Innovation and Growth announced grant program that is aimed at micro and small and mid-sized enterprises, which will also finance between 35% and 50% of the investment for solar plus storage on site for companies. And we expect that this program will really experience a lot of interest, because businesses in Bulgaria are really feeling the pinch of the energy crisis. They are on the free market, not so much protected from the energy prices. So a lot of interest will go to this program. It has been announced for public consultation for about a month, and projects will start to apply for financing early, I think, in the first quarter next year. So on the behind-the-meter applications, I think we are developing pretty fast on the scale. We remain to see how we touch on the large-scale projects. In terms of policy recommendations, of course, the regulatory framework needs to be developed further to give at least definitions for what a storage system is and how it can participate in the current market. Bulgaria has the advantage of having hydro pumped storage in the energy systems for a long time. So at least on that side, a lot of the regulation is already kind of favorable to acknowledging the value of storage systems and how they enter the market. But specifically for battery storage, as Toby said, the regulatory system and regulation need to recognize the true value of this system, their flexibility, their applications on multiple use cases, and allowing them actually to give this revenue stack and participate in the market in the various way that they can help the balancing of the system, both on a daily basis and as bulk powers system services, especially on the ancillary services part. So this is like a short summary for Bulgaria. I will post now the link to a report and remain available for your questions after that.
Thank you so much, Mariana, for this very nice overview of the situation here in Bulgaria. And as we are a little bit pressed on time, I would like to give the word to our next speaker, who is Vasilis Triantafyllos. He is Special Advisor to the Secretary General for Energy and Mineral Resources at the German Ministry of Environment and Energy. He has a legal and regulatory background in the area of energy markets and renewable energy sources, for the most part working with national authorities, but also on various projects across Central and Eastern Europe. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to tell us from his very rich experience. Vasilis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Constanza. Good morning from Athens. Thank you very much for this invitation, Martin, Constanza, and everyone at the Center for the Study of Democracy. And thank you for all the good work you're doing for the energy sector of the region, among other things. Also, congratulations to Toby for a comprehensive presentation that covered almost every base and most of what I was planning to say. So I consider my input complementary to what Toby mentioned. So I will touch upon three things mainly. One of them is what we're doing here in the strategic outlook, let's say, in Greece. What we plan to do in the coming decade and even further. The second part will be about some key policies and programs that we have designed to support storage in Greece, and also how a smaller component will be how those touch upon the regional security for the region. And of course, the third part will be how we plan to pay for all that. And this is a very, very significant part of the discussion. Toby already highlighted the need to incentivize. Constanza mentioned that we need to allocate public funds wisely and in a strategic way in order to maximize the benefit we get from that. So, first part, the strategic outlook. Greece has its National Energy and Climate Plan, provides for participation in renewable participation in electricity production of about 61% to 64% by 2030. Right now, where 2021 was renewables were around 42%. This year is forecast to close at around 50% of all electricity production here in Greece. Our studies show that in order to get to the 61 to 64% penetration, we need around 1.5 gigawatts of storage. This was enshrined, this was described in the existing NECP back in 2019. Right now, as all EU member states, we are looking on how to adapt the 2019-2020 targets to the new European initiatives such as Fit for 55 and REPowerEU and all that. We have already started work on our new NECP, even though it went back to 2024, the deadline. But we're already working on it, and our first projection is that in order to meet the Fit for 55 target, we need at least 80% penetration, or not at least, around 80% penetration of share of renewables in electricity production, and this can happen only if we have more than 5 gigawatts and up to 8 gigawatts of storage. This basically means that we have a target for 1.5, and we need to triple that at least, and then some to get to the new targets. How we plan to do that? First of all, we have the 1.5 target, the existing 1.5 target, pretty much covered. We do that from three key policies that have already been designed, approved by the European Commission, and we have secured funding for them. Just as bullets, the first one is a big pump storage project. a 680 megawatt project in Amphilohia. This is a project of around 500 million to 750 million budget. It will be granted state aid of 250 million. This has been approved by DigiComp, and it will. This is investment aid, and it will also get some sort of operational aid for the next 25 years in order to make sure that the revenues meet the intended IRR. So 680 megawatts pumped storage. Second program is the incentivization of introducing up to 900 megawatt of battery storage in the Greek system. This has a 200 million budget for investment aid, so basically for CapEx. And then we will also give a 10-year long CFD that will ensure that the investor gets their money back, but it will also avoid any overcompensation. We already have in this second program, the battery storage, we have 44 projects in the pipeline that have already secured at least the production license and are moving towards environmental permitting that amount to 12 gigawatts. So, and this will, the separation will be through auctions. So you can understand that we cover, the pipeline covers by 13 times the capacity we're going to allocate. And this is, this guarantees that we will have significant competition in those auctions. We find the combination of auctions and CFDs a very, very useful tool. I will get into that a bit in the last part of my presentation. An indicative, let's say, approach on how we see this going is that for one, I mean, the study case that we presented to the Commission to get this blended scheme approved, combining both investment aid and operational aid, is that for a 100 megawatt project of batteries, these are of course figures for the beginning of the year or end of last year, so things might have changed a bit with battery prices and all that. But in principle, the thinking is that a 100 megawatt battery storage project with 220,000 euro subsidy per megawatt for CapEx and a 60,000 euro compensation for operation gives about an IRR of about 8%. Of course, the OPEX will not be fully subsidized. The operational, the OPEX will be captured from market revenues, and if those are not enough, then we will step in and pay more. If they exceed this threshold, then the battery operator will return money. This is a fundamental two-way safety. So this is the second large project. The third one, Toby also mentioned it, is a more, let's say, innovative project, and it's targeted on Greek islands. We have a program to deploy around 260 megawatts of battery storage on islands. Greece, as you know, has 170, at least 170 inhabited islands, and it has 25 autonomous systems. So there are islands or island complexes that are isolated, that are not connected to the mainland, and are mainly powered through fossil fuels, and a small amount of renewables on them, which are basically curtailed for various reasons, the technical minimum of thermal units and all that. So what we did was we approved a support scheme for those islands. We grouped those islands into three main categories. One of them, a category by itself, is Crete, which has 600,000 inhabitants. It has around 3.5 terawatt hours of power needs every year. And there we will subsidize 4 mature projects. One of them is pumped hydro, the rest are battery storage, hybrid battery storage. And then on the other 2 categories of islands, some smaller ones that are not planned to be interconnected ever or in the foreseeable future, we subsidize them through a feed-in tariff. And then for the others, we have auctions again, and we have a feed-in tariff for the first year and not for the first years. And after they become interconnected, we switch it to a CFD. So those are three very mature programs that are actually being deployed now. There are a number of other things we're doing. We have included in our let's say, basic fundamental support scheme for renewables that we approved recently with DZCOM for another 4 years. We have an option to do auctions for the mainland now that are specific to renewable and storage hybrid systems. And we also have 2 programs that are currently being designed, but have been also been included in the recovery and resilience facility financing for behind-the-meter storage. One of them is for small enterprises that want to install rooftop solar plus battery storage, and then use it mainly for self-consumption. And there's another program. It's not currently in the RRF, but there are thoughts of included in the 2023 revision for household rooftop solar with a small battery that will also give some added flexibility to the grid. So, I mean, we can get into more detail on each of the programs if you want later on. 2 words on financing. The main, next generation EU and the RRF have been a godsend for us, because right as we started to think about 2-3 years ago to think about transforming the energy sector, picking up the pace, increasing the ambition, we got this amount of money that we not only we could use to speed things up, but we had to use. As you know, RRF obliges you to have 38% of its funding dedicated to the green transition. So we got 450 million euro to subsidize the capex of the first 2 projects I said, the pumped hydro and the battery storage auction projects. And then we find that good design is also fundamental in making sure that you have the money. We use CFDs wherever we can, basically. And there are very few cases where a CFD doesn't make sense. And this is, for example, on very small islands where you need there's no market effectively, and you need a feed-in tariff, or you need something to attract any sort of interest. But CFDs are the main tool we use, and also where we subsidize, for example, through a regulated asset-based approach. There we use clawback mechanisms to make sure that there's no overcompensation. So we know, and the investor knows, that we can plan for the decades to come with a controlled outcome financially. So this has been really useful for us, and we try to replicate this approach, this thinking of hedging for both sides of the equation in all our designs. So I will stop here. Again, if you want to get into any more detail, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vasilis, for sharing this very detailed and insightful overview. We in Bulgaria certainly have a lot to learn from Greece in terms of how to accommodate the upscaling of storage. So without any further ado, I would like to give the word to our final speaker, Mihai Balan, who is head of the Energy Systems Program at EPG. He has a background in research and development in the field of energy storage technologies, hydrogen, lithium-ion batteries, both in Romania and in France. So Mihai, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say on our main questions, basically the use cases of storage, how they can accommodate the green transition in Romania and in the region in general, the main regulatory barriers, and of course, also the market opportunities. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this great discussion. It is very much needed these days when the whole Europe is looking to strengthen its energy security. We have the REPowerEU chapter in the National Recovery and Resilience Plans, and we hope to see a lot of storage coming to the grid in the next few years. So I was carefully listening to you, and I must say that unfortunately Romania is lagging a bit behind in terms of developing or deploying storage actually, but we really hope to catch up with you and together strengthen the grid in the entire region, because this is very much needed. What I can tell you about Romania's plans for storage, because at the moment we only have plans. Everybody's talking about storage today, but nobody's doing really anything on the ground. So we don't really have a lot of projects being developed at the moment we speak. However, the plans are big. Because if we look at the REPowerEU targets, the 45% renewables target at European level, we need at least 2 gigawatts of battery storage to be installed in order to make the grid accommodate all the additional renewables that will be connected. And this has to come in the next 8 years, which is not really a long time. Fortunately, storage has a short time to market. So we're pretty confident that well, the potential is there and the money is there, and that eventually we will get there as well. However, the good news actually comes in the plans, because Romania had a dedicated chapter, still has a dedicated chapter in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan for battery storage, and the Ministry of Energy just announced 2 weeks ago a support scheme of 100 million euros for developing 240 megawatts / 480 megawatt hours of battery storage by the end of 2025. The good news is that there's capex support up to 167,000 euros per megawatt hour of battery storage, and up to I think it's 15 million euros per project. And the ministry thinks that this should be enough, to boost the development of battery storage in Romania, because we have to say that we're starting from a very low point. Only 1.5 megawatts of battery storage are installed today in Romania, and they have been installed, if I remember well, back in 2016 by a renewables company that just wanted to have some pilot projects and see if the market can support developing large-scale storage. However, everything stopped there, but it's now time to restart this sector, and keeping in mind all the legislation, all the market conditions, all the predictability on the market signals that investors need, I think it is safe to say today that storage is part of the big plans of all the renewable developers today in Romania. And the good news is actually that the Romanian TSO also asks for it. It specifically underlines the necessity of developing storage in the next few years as a prerequisite for actually developing all the renewables that are included in the REPowerEU targets. However, there's actually a big debate in Romania, and I'm sure that Romania is not the only country in the region that has this debate, because everybody agrees that we need storage, but then maybe, we need pumped hydro storage, and Romania has a long history with almost pharaonic projects of pumped hydro that, will be ready in 10 years time at least. But, they offer a concentrated solution, a centralized solution, compared to battery storage, which offers a decentralized solution. And it is still a debate to be discussed. However, as I told you, the ministry brings forward the support scheme that only supports battery storage. So this should finally kick off the market if everything goes as expected. There's also some great news on the manufacturing side, because I've heard some great discussions, not making the same mistakes with storage as the ones that we did with natural gas. And rely on a single source of, you know, rare earth materials or manufacturing. And the Romanian government also plans to develop 2 gigawatts annual storage capacity by 2025. And it plans to allocate 2 billion euros for this. And it's actually critical, not only, you know, for the energy system, but also for the mobility sector that's quite developed in Romania. And the 2 companies that are here producing cars have plans for electrification. And I must say, you know, that Romania is actually the only country in this part of Europe that doesn't really have a large-scale battery manufacturer. The news is great. However, it still needs to be followed up with action, and there will also be a need for training people to work in this sector. And yeah, the governmental plans are for training 20,000 people over the next 5 years. So if everything goes according to their plans, we should be able to get there and kickstart a market for energy storage uses and manufacturing over the next years. On the barriers that we are having, it's a very delicate subject, because on one hand, I will tell you what happened in the last years. Everybody was asking for storage, but nobody wanted to do anything. Everybody was pointing their fingers at the renewables sector because they're not installing storage, but they were the ones asking for legislation to allow them to install storage. Finally, the legislation is there, along with the regulatory framework from the TSO. So one barrier down, several more left. One of them is related to the possibility of having hybrid projects, which is, of course, a necessity these days when everybody wants to obtain, you know, high load factor and stabilize a bit the output of renewables, particularly solar PV. It is something that we're still working at the legal and regulatory level, but we really hope to have everything cleared out in the upcoming months so that we will be able to see hybrid projects, because we're also pushing for support schemes for integrated, you know, hybrid solar, wind, and storage projects. What I can actually say is that, you know, finally the money is here. Romania has unprecedented levels of financing from the Recovery and Resilience Fund, especially from the Modernization Fund, and there's also a lot of investors willing to put their money to Romania. The legislation is lagging a bit behind, but it should get there, and the market should be actually kickstarted by this support scheme that I was telling you about, launched by the Ministry of Energy 2 weeks ago. It is not perfect. It is a start. We hope that it will be made a bit more efficient, because it's being, you know, being the first mechanism of this type. Mistakes are sometimes made, but we hope that the ministry will be able to adapt and make it as efficient as possible. Because at the end of the day, if we look at all the numbers, at least for 2030, I mean, even for 2030, storage is paramount, you know, for allowing the high rates of renewables to get connected. And in the same time, even more importantly, it allows us to wean off a bit from Russian gas, because if we're able, you know, to lower the use of CCGTs in the summer period just for balancing renewables, we will be able to store more gas for the winter times when there's really, for the moment, no solution, at least for the upcoming 2 or 3 years. And if we look at you know, an economic case based on this, I mean, the gas that we're saving really helps pay for the battery storage that we should be installing, you know, along the other business cases that are made available. So just to conclude my intervention, the future is here for battery. It's really time to actually start installing them, not just to talk about it as we did in the last 6 or 7 years, at least in Romania.
Thank you so much, Mihai, and especially for these last words on energy security and the links between gas and battery storage. I think this is very important as well. I would like to now very briefly open the floor for discussion, as we have actually overstepped our limited time today. So in case anyone from our guests would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. And otherwise, I do have one question. Oh, here we have one quick question from Kauyan Kusov. As this is a very long question, would you like to actually elaborate yourself, basically to turn on your mic and ask your question so that I don't have to read it?
And I see that Gennady has also.
Yeah, Gennady, please, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thanks for the chance. Gennady from E3G. I have a short note related to one technology that I think maybe should have found place also in the report, and that's pretty often overseen and underestimated as potential. This is the heat storage technologies. Even though it's not the classic electric battery that we're used to think about when we talk about storage, this is something that has a huge potential, especially with the rise of the heat pumps market, also as a technology that can be used behind the meter in households. Usually most of the heat pumps are using sort of a heat or cold buffer that is part of their systems. This could simply be enlarged to a size that can take the opportunity to store heat or cold when electric energy is much more available, and then return it to for use during the peak hours of the energy system. This turns such systems into much more smart grid ready options, and it's really underexplored and underexploited potential at this point.
Excellent point.
And can I just have a very short note on the Greek plan? It's more of a question. It's related to the current, Greece is currently having plans for huge battery storages, but also already quite developed when it comes to gas turbines capacity to balance the grid. How does this combine? Are the gas turbines that have already been used for a couple of years and more or less they're at place since 2015, are they going to be simply used a lot less and depending on the price of the gas that is available? Or, I mean, is there any perspective on this? And there are rumors that Greece in the next revision of the NECP is going to move even more ambitiously to 85% of renewable electricity in the power mix. Any comments on that?
Excellent questions, Gennady. So I'll take real quick the first two on thermal storage and gas, and then pass it on to Vasilis for the question on Greece. I've added this, or I've pulled this up from the report. This is in the longer version. Here we do get into thermal storage solutions, and you are absolutely right. This is an area that has huge untapped potential, and the ability to connect thermal loads to smart technologies is hugely important for a successful integration of variable renewables, because you can unlock a lot of flexible demand. Flexibility or demand response doesn't just need to come from large industries like smelters or others, as used to be thought to be the case. Today, with distributed technologies, we can essentially do so by aggregating lots of small loads, lots of water heaters, different types of space heaters, different types of fluids and substrates that can actually enable thermal storage to be connected and networked and controlled in a smart way that opens up a whole new scale of potential for flexibility and for integrating variable renewables. So we do get into that in the report, and you are absolutely right. That is a huge hugely important topic and one that we don't talk about enough. To your second point about gas, my understanding of the dynamics, I mean, in a functioning electricity market, storage competes. So from markets like California, I've had discussions with folks at CalISO and some of the people doing the actual system operations and observing the behavior of storage in systems with large volumes of gas. And what they're finding is actually storage is, in many cases, better, cheaper, and faster at responding to system needs than gas plants are. So what we're starting to see, and this is again quite I think an exciting further sign of the strength of storage and the fundamentals of storage, is that storage is starting to beat gas at its own game. And I think that's an important shift here in recent last couple of years that I think we all should look at more closely. So I'll stop there and pass it on to Vasilis.
Yes, thank you, Toby, and thank you, Gennady, for the question. First of all, a small disclaimer. I'm a lawyer, so I should have started with the disclaimer, but I forgot. For some reason, I'm putting it in place now. I'm not speaking as I'm affiliated with the ministry, but these are my personal views, especially when it comes to assessments that are not official policy or anything. So, two things on the role of gas in electricity and its interrelation with storage. The first one, Greece has a policy in place to disassociate its electricity production from lignite by 2028. This was well underway. This was undertaken in 2019. It was well underway for the first couple of years. And then the whole crisis happened, and we didn't delay the plans. We actually put a law in place during the crisis that says that by 2028 we will stop all electricity production from solid fossil fuels. But still, this is the decision. By 2028 we will not have lignite. So we have to substitute lignite with something. And the answer to what the optimal mix will be is basically, it has two approaches. One is the system adequacy approach, meaning we need all the resources we can get in order to make sure we have enough electricity in the lines, in the grid, the system. This is answered by our TSO, and our TSO has studied and keeps studying and updating its system adequacy report, and it came up with the, let's say, the approach or the suggestion or the observation that we need, of course, the storage that was mentioned in the first part of my presentation, but also we also need to keep gas in the mix. And not only to stay with the existing power units, but we need at least two more units in order to have a secure system. I should note here that this is Greece currently doesn't have a capacity remuneration mechanism in place, a capacity mechanism to support or to incentivize new capacity, new gas-fired capacity or capacity for the system. So this is basically, I mean, those two observations. I don't know if they're an answer to the question, but that they are the best answer I can give you. We need both storage and gas, and we need more of both in order to make sure we have a grid. Now, from a strategic perspective, and since you mentioned the NECP, I don't know if I'm also involved very closely with the NECP revision. This is not just something I cannot share with you. We have not locked into our final scenarios yet. All indications say that the renewable share in our electricity will be around 80%, it might be 78, it might be 82. I don't know where it will, where the ball will sit at the end, but it will be around that the vicinity of that number. But again, going back to the role of gas, this will also be explored and is extensively being modeled in the new NECP, not just for 2030, but also for the our revised NECP will have binding targets that correlate to our climate law that set an 55% emission reductions for 30, 80% for 40, and then net zero for 2050. And the NECP will show us also how to get to that ultimate goal, let's say, ultimate target, net zero. And it will also extensively map the trajectory of what will happen with gas in the grid, what will happen with investments in infrastructure in gas, what will happen with new capacity or removing capacity, however is needed, and all that. So I don't know if it answered your question, but this is actually, it's a very complicated issue, and this is the best answer I can give at this time.
Thank you, Vasilis. I see that Mariana has also raised her hand.
Yes, I wanted to take the word on Kalyan's questions about the regulatory frameworks for self-consumption systems. This is also currently being discussed on European Union level, because a regulation is coming on accelerating the permitting for renewable system, and especially systems that are up to a certain capacity will be fast-tracked. And depending on how the regulatory systems are structured in different countries, different rules will apply, but generally the Commission aims to permit small systems in 1 month or up to 3 months for some bigger systems. And on the self-consumption, when there is no export of electricity to the grid in any way, so no net metering, it's entirely for self-consumption. Most of the countries that have such systems are going for notifications only. So irrespective whether you are a household or an enterprise, the preferred choice for policy in these directions is to have a notification only for installing such systems. This is, I think, the direction that Bulgaria is going as well. We currently have such a notification regime, at least in part, for self-consumption for renewable systems. And now with the new schemes that is coming up for the small and medium-sized enterprises, I believe that this will be also applied to them. So as long as there is no export to the grid, it should be a notification regime. This is what we are currently fighting for as a policy.
Thank you, Mariana. And as we have already passed our limited time, I would like to pass on the word to Martin to close the discussion today. Thank you all for the questions and the comments. Also, we have a few more comments in the chat, but yeah, let's wrap it up and look for a next event going forward.
Thanks so much, Constanza, for the excellent moderation. And thank you to all the speakers for these very detailed overviews of the perspectives for the development of the storage industry in the region. Toby, great presentation, very inspiring. I urge everyone to look at the full set of slides. There is a lot to learn there. It's very optimistic. And indeed, Southeast Europe will need to transform its electricity sector. And there is money for that, as Mihai mentioned. And this decade is a key one for basically phasing out fossil fuels and increasing the investments in renewables. We cannot do that without storage in order to balance the system and achieve security supply. So we need to find ways to foster these technological innovations, but not at the expense of, I would say, taxpayers, and not at the expense of a liberalized electricity market that is geared towards democratization, towards the households and the small and medium-sized businesses that would have to basically unleash this growth in storage. And that will be the safest and I think the most resilient way to do that. we need to be cautious about the growing risks of Europe increasing its dependence on authoritarian states for the metals and minerals and the supply chains that would feed into this growth of transition technologies, storage technologies. So we need to friendshore and increase production locally of these equipments, and this will be a hard task also on the diplomatic front. So it's not only about technology, it's not about regulatory frameworks only, but it's also about international diplomacy and how can we bring all of these equipment and natural resource producing countries into a wider alliance for global decarbonization of the energy system. With these words, I would like to again thank everyone for joining us today, and looking forward to other events where we're going to showcase that Southeast Europe is no longer a lagging region, but a leader in a cutting-edge technology like storage. Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing you again. Bye.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Martin, and thank you, CSD, for organizing the great event and for the partnership. Wishing you all a great day, and look forward to next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.